Well, I had David Benedict up to the house and I thought, he's going to teach me how to chop and we'll chat away, and at the end of it I'll have a nice tight 10-minute video. But what happened is David is so entertaining and we were having so much fun, I ended up with a 45-minute video. I think you're going to love it. It's like a big long video podcast as opposed to a short little 30-second attention grabber. So sit back, enjoy this wonderful time that I had with the amazing David Benedict. You should watch that episode of Friends where Phoebe is teaching Joey how to do guitar.
Like, that is one benefit of going to the gym and having to do that for so long. You really get it down and it becomes second nature in no time.
I can't even remember where A is.
So close.
Well, welcome back. I'm here with the wonderful David Benedict. David is way better at this stuff than I am.
No, not at all.
We just did a video for his channel and he's just like, he went into presenter mode. And I'm like, wow.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. I thought I was kind of just grasping at straws there for a minute.
I assumed that you pre-wrote the script for your own video, and then I'm like, hello everybody, welcome to, what am I going to say next?
No, man. This is the real thing, man. I have no idea what I'm going to say.
People don't realize the amount of outtakes that I do on my videos.
Oh, man. There's like terabytes of footage that I regretfully have saved of all those things. Yeah.
Did you save them?
Well, it's just like I do one big video chunk. So like, you get maybe 10 minutes out of 2 hours worth of footage, but you have to save the whole file. So if someone saw the other hour and 50 minutes, man.
How long do you have to go on YouTube before you have a curse word that you have to? Is it 30 seconds or something?
Is that right?
You know when you say no profanity on YouTube, that's no profanity within the first 30 seconds.
Is that
of
it?
the video? Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah. Something like that anyway.
We're about 30 seconds in now, aren't we? Yeah.
God damn it. So you're going to teach me how to chop. You're going to keep it really simple because I'm not very good at it. But maybe we'll play something and you can you can chop it. What was I playing Cherokee Shuffle earlier?
Mm-hmm, that's a great one, yeah.
So mostly I'm like thrilled that I remember the chords, As in, I briefly, I roughly knew what I was supposed to be playing, and then I realized that I decided that I would, do it on an Irish pick, which meant that anything strummy that I was doing would sound like.
Well, like Sam Bush, like one of the heroes of bluegrass mandolin, he uses a Fender Heavy, and he gets like that amazing sound. I had a friend describe Sam Bush's chop. The sound is like a wet sock hitting an empty trash can. I love that. It's like thwack, it's got that depth to it. And yeah, he somehow pulls it out of a Fender Heavy. I think he maybe uses the rounded shoulder of the pick instead of like the point, like on one of these triangle picks. But yeah, so there's precedence for thinner picks.
He's a chop master, though, Sam.
Yeah, you can listen to a Sam Bush record, or you can listen to a record and hear the mandolin and know that it's Sam Bush automatically, just because the sound of his chop, which is amazing. And that's what I love about the chop chord in particular. It's such a seemingly small part of a bluegrass mandolin player's role, but it's so quintessential. The sound is so identifiable from one player to the next, just depending on how long they hold the chord or where they place the chord in relation to the bass player, if they're pushing ahead, pulling behind, and the tone that they get out of their mandolin. So yeah, it's something I'm very passionate about.
Right, okay. Yeah. Now I'm already regretting playing something in A, because I feel like now we need to discuss chopping in A, and immediately I was like, well, I'm just going to use my thumb for low A. We were talking about this earlier.
It's so good.
I talked to Tristan Scroggins online, and he went a little bit pale at the notion. Is this a complete no-no?
Well, I don't know. I've only seen that maybe done once or twice, where like Mike Marshall, if he's playing like there's that passage in the Bach cello suite, if you go to like the middle of the part, there's this section where it does that, where you have to play a G sharp and then play other notes up the neck, like up to the 5th fret. So instead of like having to do something weird where you're reaching up with your pinky, I think he does that where he uses the thumb. But that's honestly the only time I've seen any mandolin player use the thumb like that. But there's precedence for it, and if someone like Mike does it, then I think we're free to do it too.
So what would you do as a... So there's two parts to chopping, right?
Yeah.
There's knowing the chords and how to get the finger positions right, and then there's what the right hand does. Mm-hmm. So what would you do to a complete noob?
Yes, so there's two chop shapes. They're basically very similar and related, but there's the 3-finger chop chord, like this, which I think is a much easier place to start because you're just holding down 3 sets of strings and you're trying to find a way of muting the high E string. But it's a feasible shape for anyone, even if you're just starting out. It's not a huge stretch. Like that's your C chop chord, and the frets are 5, 2, and 3 on your G, D, and A strings. So that's what I would recommend starting with, just putting your fingers down one at a time. You can practice going from like your index finger up to your ring, or you could go from your ring back down to your index finger, or you could even practice like putting your G string finger down and then your D string and then your A string, just different combinations to build up that finger independence and muscle memory that you need to get that shape, because it does take a little while. Often I'll tell my beginner students, just like pop on your favorite TV show and for like 20-30 minutes just practice doing that. And before you know it, like once you've watched 3 episodes, you probably got your C chop down.
You should watch that episode of Friends where Phoebe is teaching Joey how to do guitar.
Oh,
and
yeah.
She doesn't do chords, she's like claw, tiger. So watch that episode and practice putting your fingers down.
That's so applicable. So that's the first shape. And then the second shape is very similar. It's like if you move the C shape down towards the ground, now you have like your ring finger on the D string, your index on the A, and your middle is on the E. So that's the core of the shape. But then to get your G string in action, you're just reaching up with your pinky to the 7th fret, which is really already kind of like one of the hardest shapes to make on the mandolin. What I hate about this is that like often beginner mandolin books, they'll show you this like on page 1 or 2, and they'll be like, good luck, and that's that.
Yes.
And I
was just going to speak directly to all the Irish banjo players who, avoid using your pinky at all costs. Now you got to do it, right?
I think there's something really identifiable about that sound. Like you have that interval of a 4th on the bottom, which sounds, There's a lot of classic bluegrass songs that use that. Kind of sounds like a train whistle too, which is another iconic trope. So yeah, I think it's worthwhile really getting used to that shape, even though it may seem ridiculous at first. And some people, they get around it by using like different shapes that are still the same chord, but use easier configurations to get that muted chop sound. But yeah, not only is this great for chords, but maybe we'll get into it as well. Like you can use this shape for melodies and double stops, and a lot of bluegrass vocabulary kind of arises out of that formation on the fretboard. So it's useful for other things besides playing backup.
So you gotta make sure that your fingers clear the other strings, though, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing too. Like a lot of beginners I see, they'll do this. Well, they'll try to do like the guitar thing where their fingers are parallel to the frets, and they'll stretch back with their index and up with their pinky. And I don't know if that's really feasible for many people to get the chop shape like that. You're kind of limiting your range of access. So I think about it more like a violin where you have this kind of angle with your fingers. I tell students, it's almost like you're coming up with your left hand to shake someone else's hand like this and just supporting the bottom of the neck, and then just laying your fingers over like that to get the angle that you need. And when you do this, it's going to feel uncomfortable no matter what, but it's much easier to get that reach with your pinky up to the G string, and to be able to bend all your joints like you were saying, so that you're just pressing down with your fingertips. So you should be able to hear every single note in the chord, even though we're going to get to muting it to get that kind of dry chop sound later on. You want to make sure that you're still hearing the chunk of the chord in there, like a harmony. Yeah, exactly, the chunk. Or the...
How am I doing this?
Yeah, that's the idea. Totally.
Totally legit.
You got it, man. Now we're chopping.
See, what I'd like to do is just not use this and just kind of mute.
That's, that some people get away with that, yeah. A couple of cheats.
Some people get away with that.
Some people get away with that. Maybe a couple other cheats I'd recommend.
That's David code for don't do that.
Maybe don't do that. One thing I have seen people do, like I was talking to John Reichman, legendary mandolin player, played with Tony Rice back in the day, and he tells people to do this. Just play your low 2 strings on the G and the D, and mute the other strings, like by laying down your index finger across those strings. So that way you're still getting that 4th interval on the bottom. It sounds like really choppy, but you don't have to worry about doing that huge stretch with your pinky. Also, like when you chop, you're trying to go for the lower end of the spectrum. Like you don't want that high G to be too obtrusive, because it starts to get in the way of whoever is taking a solo. Like if you're taking a solo on Cherokee Shuffle, like I don't want that high A note to get in the way of what you're playing, because that's kind of in the soloist register. Right. So going for more of that lower sound offers kind of a more subtle support, which I think is useful. So that's a really nice way to get around it. You just use those low 2 strings. I can totally
do this one.
Mm-hmm. And then for folks who want like a full chord in that position, this is another kind of cheat as well. If you just add in the 5th fret on your A string and the 7th fret on your E string, you get this closed position shape, which is also really useful. It's very similar to a chop chord. But that way you don't have to worry about muting the high strings. You can actually hold down notes to get a full chord there.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah, it's like a bar chord. At this point, you can think about any chord as a chop chord, which is, I know, really useful. Like Sam Bush, who I mentioned earlier, like he does, I think people call it like the cowboy chords. Have you ever heard that before? Like your open chords?
I've never heard the name, no.
I think that's what like kind of the first gin bluegrassers called those chords. He'll use like a cowboy G here, and then he'll just use his free fingers to mute the strings like on the 2 and 4. So it's able to get a really full resonant sound, but still get that percussive backbeat. And he plays like kind of more reggae style rhythms, and I think using those chords for different styles and still getting a chop sound is really useful.
I like that one.
In fact, like I think I was accidentally doing that when we were playing, with like your A chord, like your cowboy A chord here, or I just call like an open A. That's probably the proper term for it, isn't it? Because it's nice when you're playing like a duet like this. You don't want to just not hear any chord at all. And sometimes like when you're chopping, it's not the most supportive sound if you're just the only accompanist for another player. So often I'll do that, like where I'll let the chord ring out, the open chord ring out, and then just give a slight kind of mute on the 2 and the 4 to get that backbeat sound for bluegrass. But if you are playing in a bluegrass band, kind of the caveat is like all the instruments in the bluegrass band have very specific rhythmic roles. And as a mandolin player, if you're playing in a 5-piece traditional lineup with, you know, banjo, fiddle, guitar, bass, and mandolin, it's like your job is to do the backbeat pretty much the majority of the time. So using those chop shapes and just playing that really kind of uncomplicated 2 and 4 chop.
The backbeat is 2 and 4.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So the way it's confusing depending on how you think about it, because if you're thinking in 2/4 time, like a lot of people do, the mandolin is chopping on the and of 1 and the and of 2, and the bass is kind of playing on the 1 and the 2. So the bass might be going like 1, 2, 1, 2, and then the mandolin's doing 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. But I don't know. I always grew up hearing it in 4/4. You know, where it's like the bass would be then playing on 1 and 3. And then the mandolin's chopping on 2 and 4. So yeah, it'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's the same thing. It's confusing depending on like which time signature that you're used to. But often I just call that the backbeat. Whether you're thinking in 2/4 or 4/4, you're kind of alternating between those bass notes.
What's 4 on the floor?
4 on the floor, yeah, that's a good question. So 4 on the floor is like where the kick drum is, you know, doing 1, 2, 3, 4, and often that's in bluegrass you hear that where maybe the bass is not alternating between the root and the 5th like I was doing there. Maybe they're doing like 1, 2, 3, 4, mostly kind of playing the roots. At least that's my kind of understanding. And then for the mandolin, you have some options there. Like you can either it might not sound great to still do the backbeats like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. There you might want to go to like halftime, I guess people call it, or you know, where you're just chopping on the 3. So be like, you know, you play that root there on the floor, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the mandolin might just be chopping on the 3, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, that's probably for a very specific kind of like more progressive bluegrass sound, like you hear maybe Billy Strings or the Dusters or folks like that are kind of getting more into like a jam space grass section of their song. They might go to like that, like where you're playing on the 3 cut or halftime, I guess people call it, where you're just doing half as many chops. It's confusing, isn't it?
Yeah, halftime, full time, 4 on the floor, 1 on the 4, 1 on the 3, 3 on the 4.
But that's just my limited understanding. I mean, like, what would you think about 4 on the floor?
That's what I would have thought it was. You know, that at one point in a tune, you might go like you're just hitting all the downs.
Yeah, that's another way to accent it as well. Like instead of just chopping on the 3, you could like, like kind of like emphasize all of the beats and interesting like that. Yeah.
Do you do triplet chops?
So there's this trick. Have you ever seen this? Like, I can't do it very well. Do you ever do that? Like,
no, hammer on chop.
Exactly, yeah. So it's like chop with your index meeting the strings, and then you kind of hit the strings with your left hand, and then do the upstroke afterwards. So you're creating that triplet effect. Like,
all right, let me try that. So I'm holding it down.
Yep, that's it. It's fun.
You have to hit it pretty hard.
Yeah.
So when would you use that?
I hardly ever use that. That's just kind of like a fun party trick that you can impress all your mandolin friends with.
That sounds awful when they do it.
But sometimes, like, you might be if you're playing like a. I can't even think of how I do this. I think like there's some progressive bluegrass styles, like maybe where you're thinking more of that 4 on the floor kind of halftime feel, where you might do like a kind of like almost like an electric guitar kind of riff, and you might throw in like a little almost like triplet or 2/16 notes kind of feel. Like definitely hear like the Punch Brothers, like movement and location kind of stuff.
Do you know, it was funny because I was chatting with Jacob Jolliffe.
Yeah, he's the pro at that, yeah.
But I didn't realise, because I'd been listening to Joy Kill Sorrow for years, and never bothered to look up to see who was in the band. And then they have that one big song that I can't remember the name of it now.
Such Great Heights, or no, Postal Service.
Such Great Heights. The triplet chop on that is insane.
Yeah, he's just going non-stop, yeah.
You wouldn't break into that in the middle of a session, in the middle of a jam session.
So it really depends. Like the chop, I think fits in on every style of music, and you can use these different applications to kind of better fit into what sect of bluegrass you're playing. Like the progressive stuff really suits like that Jake Jolliffe style and Such Great Heights, or like kind of more the reggae stuff that Sam Bush does. But if you're in like a traditional bluegrass jam, you're gonna get like weird looks if you start doing that stuff. People really want you just to chop on the backbeat.
Would you activate the chair snappers?
What's that?
So, the chair snappers are people that are at a bluegrass festival and you do something progressive, and to show their disdain, they take up their lawn chairs and they snap the lawn chair and walk off.
Oh,
and they're known as chair snappers. That's what we Banjo 3 had a set one time called Chair Snappers Delight.
That's hilarious. Oh my goodness. Yeah, you definitely get some chair snappers, I guess, if you're doing this in the wrong circle for sure. Yeah, and there's all sorts of other weird stigmas too. Like some people say that you're not supposed to ever chop if there's another person chopping. Have you ever heard that before too? Like
no.
If you're at a bluegrass jam and there's like another mandolin player and they're playing the chop chord shapes, some people think it as a faux pas to also double that shape.
Yeah.
Because I guess if you think about it, it's such a short sound. Like when you play these shapes and you just are accenting that backbeat with this really quick chord, and you're just hitting like a small microsecond there of the actual harmony, and then muting the strings, there's a lot of potential for flams, like where someone's like, feeling the beat a little bit faster, a little bit slower, and you get this like, kind of like the triplet chop sound, which drags everyone down or speeds everyone up in a negative way. So
it's like having two barons in an Irish session.
Exactly, yeah. And even like it goes across instruments sometimes too. Like I remember in this bluegrass band I played in Mile 12, we were very persnickety about like when instruments were taking fills or solos. Like if I was taking fills, Bronwyn, our fiddle player, she would chop on the fiddle to take that chop sound, to carry that roll while everyone else was playing rhythm and I was being featured melodically. But she would never do that if I was playing chop. It has to be just one person filling that role. There's definitely, I think, room for variance and for different opinions about that particular thing. But it is like a good idea to try to be as rhythmically precise as possible. I think in bluegrass, someone described to me, bluegrass is like 5 people trying to play the same drum kit at the same time, which is very true. It's like, everyone has these very important roles, and you're trying to line up and sync up in a way that it feels like you're playing one instrument, which I know is similar with other styles of music as well, but having that tight groove, that tight pocket, like you hear in such great bluegrass bands like we've been talking about, that's so important.
So you're like the snare drum as well, is that
exactly?
Is that part of it?
Yep. Indeed.
So where do you play up here? Is there a specific place that you pick to get that woody tone?
Mostly, like I keep it in the same spot. Like you mentioned Jacob Jolliffe. He's a great example of a guy. He kind of has the same right hand approach no matter what he's doing, whether he's playing like chop chords or playing double stops or single note melodies. He doesn't change his pick grip or his technique really. It's seamless, so he can transition from one to the next. I think that's fairly true of his pick placement too. So for most bluegrass players, we tend to have our pick right at the end of that extension there, the Florida they call it.
The Florida?
Because it's shaped like the state of Florida.
I guess that.
And even if you don't have an extension though, like somewhere beneath the fretboard there is usually the sweet spot where you get kind of the nicest, the nicest combination of volume and tone and attack that we tend to go for in bluegrass. So that's mostly where I keep my hand. But there's definitely chances, like if you're playing something that really needs a little extra brass and a little extra volume and attack, playing closer to the bridge will get you that too. especially if you're like also combining some of these double stops. It's so fun to play back there. It's like very Bill Monroe style, you know, like Father of Bluegrass there. But for those parts, I'm kind of playing kind of right there, as I like to say in South Carolina.
Does that sound legit?
Yeah, and I like to do that. I tell folks often, like, you know, to keep the rhythm going with your right hand, like just having like a G note, like on your G string there. I guess it's a D note, I should say. Just that low note in between the chops will kind of keep your right hand going. So it's like, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Because often you see beginners, they do this where it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. They're not moving their hands in between the beats like we should to keep the pace going.
Yeah, so there's a bit of syncing involved in order to get the lift, right?
And I think about it, it's almost like a chain reaction where it's like when you play the chop, you want all your fingers to be pressed down so you can hear that meat of the chord. And then as soon as your pick gets through all 4 strings, that's like the chain reaction for your fingers to lift off the fretboard to get that kind of dry sound. And the big confusion I think about the chop is that it's just this dry sound. You know, some players start out doing that, which it's a good way to get started if you can't make those shapes, just to get used to making that backbeat percussive sound. But you really do want there to be some of the chord there, and the only way you can get that is if you allow the chord to ring out for like a very split second before you lift
that's completely new information to me. I would have been always aiming for that, and then wondering how I add in the other bits.
But that's the cool thing is like you listen to all these different players and they have a different interpretation about how long to hold that chord out. Some people don't really hold it out at all. Some people hold it out for a long time too, and you get these different rhythmic feels depending on how long you hold it out to, which is really interesting. Like if you hold out your chop longer, it's kind of a little bit looser, right? Because you're having kind of a wider beat. You know, you're letting that chord ring out for a longer time, so everyone else can kind of sync up with you at different parts in the beat. Whereas if you are very really quick about muting, it's almost like a metronome. It's just like a very like quick end, and everyone has to be more precise in how they line up with you, which can be, you know, more desirable if you're trying to get like a really tight bluegrass sound, or if you want kind of more of a trad kind of bouncy sound, you know, like Stanley Brothers or Flat and Scruggs. Sometimes it might be nice to like let your chop ring out a little bit longer to have kind of more of a, you know, that bounce feel to what you're playing.
Yeah, I love the way you describe that as a kind of a chain reaction. That makes so much more sense to me now. The idea of so you're hitting this one first, and then the ring and lift is completely different to the way that I was imagining it. I was always like kill and hit. So that's fundamentally different. That it's ring and lift.
It takes a while, yeah.
There's a little bit more of timing in that, even more so than the other, because now there's a kind of a slight. I'm gonna have to really work on that, as well as stretching my fingers, which are now stuck in this way, and they're never gonna go back.
Pro tip: if you are struggling with that G chop, which is tricky, like you can practice on a higher chord voicing. So like you can or use that same shape for your A chord or your B chord.
No pain, no gain, dude.
That's true. G is the most common in bluegrass. That's it.
That's awesome. Can I go to a jam now? Just play one chord all the way through?
You're approved to go to a bluegrass jam. Oh my goodness. Of course you.
I'm still going to do my thumb on the A string for the A chord.
Yeah. Well, I do see that actually. People who play the chop chords, they're not actually holding down the strings, but they'll reach over with their thumb to kind of get that grip that they need to hold down.
So show me your A shape then.
So for A, I would just like move that up 2 frets. And that's the real beauty about these chords is that with the symmetrical tuning, you can just move them around anywhere you want to. Yeah.
That's cheating.
I know, right?
I was trying to figure out how you do this, and that was like, that's so painful.
Yep. That's the beauty.
So I only need to learn one shape and then just move it around.
It really is just the one shape. You know, there's the 3-finger shape, but you know, it's the same thing just without your pinky. You can move that shape around too to different chords.
And all you need then is Valium for after the session to get your fingers to relax.
I know, it is, you gotta shake it out every once in a while. That's the hard thing, like, you go to these bluegrass jams and you only, like if there's 10 people in the jam, you're only playing the melody or taking a solo for 10% of the time, and then the rest of the time you're doing this awful chord shape, and after 3 hours of doing that, it hurts sometimes.
Do you get bored?
Yeah, sometimes,
it's okay if you do.
Yeah, you do. And that's why it's like, I think in bluegrass, the coveted jams are like those tight, maybe like 4 or 5 people, and you get more opportunities to have that interplay, to take your solo more than once around the circle on a song. And if there's 20 people in the jam, you're playing like Cherokee Shuffle for 20 straight minutes, you're just like, I'm done. Like I'll like maybe stop playing, go get a coffee, come back and see what's going on.
And it still isn't your turn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what people do sometimes, which is probably not the greatest etiquette, but no, it can get boring sometimes, and that's why, if there are other mandolin players at the jam playing chop chords, you can change it up. You can play those cowboy chords, or you can play like some of those Jethro shaped chord inversions up and down the neck, and kind of mess around with the rhythms in different ways, which I find more fun. It's almost like you're playing counterpoint behind what's going on, hopefully in an undistracting way, but you have more freedom to kind of weave all those different elements together to create something interesting and something that kind of helps interplay with the soloist.
Jethro chords.
Jethro chords, yeah. Okay, we should talk about this because it's adjacent to chop chords, I promise.
Is it got to do with Jethro Tull?
No, but that would be cooler. No, it's they're named after a famous mandolin player named Jethro Burns, who he played in a vaudeville jazz duo called Homer and Jethro, and they like played these really hilarious original songs, and it's kind of like almost like the Louvin Brothers style country songs, but they played swing music instead. And yeah, he's the first one to really, I think, seriously approach jazz on the mandolin. And he may not have been the first to actually play these chord shapes, but people call them the Jethro shapes just because he used them so regularly. But what it is just these 3-note chord inversions up and down the neck. So if you're playing like an A chord, the first one is this shape right here, which I think you were maybe hinting at earlier there.
Yep.
And you can play like 4-note versions of these with the high E, but often I'll just play like the low 3 strings, again, just to kind of like be less obtrusive with the high notes, and it's easier for your left hand, and you still have all 3 notes of your triad right there for your A chord, A, C sharp, and E. So I think about that like as your root position, because you have A on the low string. But then there's 2 other shapes that you can use for the same chord. So this is the next one right here. 6, 7, and 7 for your A chord. And that's, you can think about that as your first inversion if you want to. You have like the 3rd of the chord on your bass.
Oh, so hold on, so you just you do that with 2 fingers?
Yeah, you can either do it with 2 fingers and bar down, or some people, I tend to do this a lot, where you
yeah, that would feel way more natural to me, to put all 3 fingers on.
Either way.
I try to, on banjo, certainly try to avoid kind of clamping.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to move then, right?
I get that, yeah.
Yeah.
That way you can keep all your fingers, like the joints bent in the proper way instead of having to hyperextend and make uncomfortable positions for your left hand.
Okay, so that's number 3.
Yep. So that's, you got your 3rd on the bottom, and then an easy way to find it is thinking, okay, now the root for my chord's on the middle finger on the D string. So like, there's your A note for your A chord, and you can build a shape around it. And then the last one is up here, which is your 2nd inversion. It's got the 5th of your chord on the bottom, the E note there. And you can think, okay, now my root's on my ring finger on the A string. There's my A note for my A chord, and I can make this shape around it. But the cool thing is you can move these to different strings if you want to. I'm just playing them on the low 3 strings because it's a little bit easier to strum and kind of keep the E string muted that way. But you can like play this shape up here if you wanted to. And it's the same chord, but you have to figure out a way to mute your G string, which is kind of... Oh my goodness! That's where
I knew I'd come in handy eventually. I found my calling.
There we go.
Yeah, that's what I would call an A chord.
Yeah.
From banjo world. So, that's it. Play me an A chord, it'll be that or that, of course, but I'm always thinking in terms of the open sound.
Right,
Not the chop sound.
Well, the cool thing is, like, those shapes, they're kind of like chop chords because usually you're not using open strings, so you can kind of do the same thing that we were doing earlier where you're muting the chord right after you play it to get that kind of dry sound for the backbeat. And so that's something that you can do. Like, you know, if some mandolin player at the Bluegrass Jam is doing these shapes, maybe to be different, you could play like this shape. It's like in a lower register, and you're not like stepping on anyone's toes that way. You're like, not, instead of doubling the part, you're adding something new to the jam, which is nice.
The one or the 2 and the 4, that's because most things are in 4/4 anyway, right?
Yep. Yeah, most are in 4/4. You know, there's occasionally you'll play waltzes, and it's a similar idea, but yeah, you're kind of you're chopping on either the 2 and 3 or just the 3, but you know, kind of the back half of the measure in a similar way.
Midnight on the Water.
Yeah, that's a great one.
So I did basically every chord. I was like, I'm just going to clamp on my thumb. I know that's going to sound something like a D.
Yeah, that one's nice because like you could also just chop on the 3 and it would sound really nice too. Like a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Sometimes it's a little aggressive. Do like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. If it's like a really fast waltz, it might sound nice to do that. But
yeah, I did a lesson for this on banjo.
Oh, cool! Yeah.
And it was a whole kind of a cross picking thing. That's why I remember those chords. And then the second half, I'm like, is it an F sharp minor?
I forget it. It's a beautiful melody though.
It's a great piece of music, isn't it?
And one thing that might be fun to talk about too, like you've got all those like double stop shapes around a chop chord that are almost like built into the vocabulary of how the licks work in bluegrass. There's all those fun things that are really just those 3 notes for the the 3-finger and the 4-finger chop chord, and you can play around them to no end. Like even just like that bluesy third feel there, or the dirty third, some people call it. And going back to your root there on your ring finger, or starting on the high root, like playing around with the flat 7. A lot of that, like kind of bluegrass, the blues vocabulary works so well in that shape.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is it moves around too, where if you learn that lick like over your A chord and your A chop chord, you could also play it over your D chop chord or your G. For any chord that you want to, as long as you find that proper shape. So it's super handy where if you feel lost for what to play over a solo, or maybe you're in a tough key and you don't know the scale or the territory of the fretboard you're supposed to play in, you can just like find that chop chord and just noodle around, and then when the next chord comes around, find that chop chord and noodle around that shape, and then like before you know it, you've got a whole bluegrass solo. That's like how it works. Exactly, yeah.
He was that little intro lick that you did again?
Yeah.
Oh no, you did when you were
right.
doing the double stop.
What was I doing there? Something like that.
As soon as you do that, you're just like immediately transported to
Kentucky.
Bill Monroe.
Yeah. It is so Bill Monroe. Yeah.
It's awesome. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
so good.
Like that's a big thing. Like you hear people playing those 2 double stop shapes, which are basically your chop chord, and then resolving to those 2 notes, those double stops. Some people even use like the pinky on the 4-finger one. Stuff like that. That's classic bluegrass Bill Monroe vocabulary.
Yeah. I have so much of the vocabulary to learn.
Well, it's just like incidental vocabulary. Like once you know the shape, I feel like all that stuff lays out, and you just play it because it works, and it's easy to play once you know the secret behind those shapes. Like we could play a tune, and I'm sure it'd be easy to throw some of those in. Like yeah.
chopping an A. I'm welded to this thumb. I was like, I should really try and change it up. Where is it? I don't know. Panic.
I'll just watch that Friends episode and then practice that for 20 minutes. You got it, man.
And then the more I'm panicking about the A chord, I'm starting to get really sweaty, and then the pick is slipping, and I'm like, oh my god, it's my turn to solo. And this is everybody's jam nightmare, which is like,
That's what everyone experiences, honestly. But yeah, if you go to one bluegrass jam and you're chopping for 3 hours, like that is one benefit of going to the jam and having to do that for so long. You really get it down, and it becomes second nature in no time.
I can't even remember where A is.
You got it. Just 2 up from G.
So do like me and go and watch all of David's videos, because you've got videos up there about how to construct a bluegrass solo, like preparing for the jam. I need to go and watch all your. No, I've lost it again. I think I have my finger. Oh, is that it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wonderful David Benedict. What a gift to have you in
so
Galway.
Well, thanks
in the studio.
It's so cool to see this spot in person. I've seen so many of your videos, and it's an honor to be here. Thanks again for having me.
I spent a long time tidying it up, because in my mind, David's studio is like just pristinely tidy. I don't know where other musicians put their cables when they're recording stuff. I've watched like lessons with Marcel, and I'm like, he doesn't have any cables. Where are all the cables? And I'm just like...
Mine are just on the other side of the camera. That's what you got to do. It's just the mess is behind the camera.
Yeah, my wife Gillian, she goes, oh, look at this beautiful studio side, and then this side that you don't see is like,
That's the way it always is, I think.
Chaos.